Hi guys, welcome to my funk shop tutorial of how I did the Scarlet Pleasure remix, which is not a remix, it's a re-edit as I call it, because I think re-edit is a more correct term in this case, because I'm still using the original Scarlet Pleasure track and just adding a lot of my own stuff to it. But I don't like to call it a remix. I'd like to use re-edit or remix or whatever I can figure out that isn't remix. But let's dive into it. I'm gonna try and do this fast, so it isn't like an hour long, and I'm also gonna try and do it in a way that new and upcoming producers hopefully can understand how I did this. This is really meant as a kind of an inspiration to people who maybe want to get into music production or just started and maybe are struggling a bit with some stuff. Because doing something like this is, in my opinion, a great way to kind of dive into things without biting more off than you can chew. So hopefully this will help some people maybe on a motivational level. So all right, this is Cubase. I'm using Cubase 9.5 Pro, and this is what the project looks like inside of Cubase. Obviously my laptop is actually working quite hard right now. I don't really know why, but if you can hear the fan together with my voice, sorry about that. I hope my voice is loud enough. But anyway, at the very top here you can see I have an audio track with the original Scarlet Pleasure track here. It's been time stretched from the original tempo to fit 115 BPMs, which is what I chose for my project. I think it's faster, but it's definitely still in the low kind of new disco groovy tempo, and that's basically what I wanted here. I didn't want it to go too fast, but I didn't want it to go slow either. It has to have some more party to it, so that's why I kind of raised the tempo a lot. But it still works great, and at least in my opinion, it works great. So what I've done here is it's been time stretched and obviously cut into different pieces, so it's not entirely original anymore. It's I've taken elements from here and there and placed them differently. So we can do. So we did an intro. I did an intro. So it's kind of DJ friendly. You can mix with it both at the start and at the end. And on the track itself, we have some plugins doing some stuff. The first thing I've put on is a stereo enhancer, which is actually doing the opposite of what it's called. It's doing a narrowing instead, because I kind of wanted to see if I can do a little bit of subtle widening on my drums and then narrowing in on the original track to give it a little more of like a clubbish feeling, and I wanted my drums to be more in your face than the original has. So that's one of the reasons. Then we have a fab filter, obviously a EQ, which is removing low end from the original track. What we really want here is to create space for the other elements that we're gonna add, and specifically the drums. We're gonna have a new kick, and we're gonna have some stuff that's going to collide with the original track unless you do some stuff first. So we're removing everything below 60 Hertz, and we're doing quite a bell here as well at about 130. And this is basically just to still keep some low end in the original track, but making space for a new kick and make that sound great. So that's why this is done. And also I've done a little bit of cutting at the high frequencies. This is something I do very often just to do it pretty much, because everything around 17, 18,000 hertz is something you're gonna really have a struggle hearing anyway, and many speakers can't even play that, so you can hear it, at least not in a nightclub situation. So this is something I often do, because I mean, less is more. If you have something that isn't needed, remove it. So EQ, that's what's basically what EQing is all about, is taking stuff away you don't need. Sometimes you can boost stuff as well if you feel something is missing, but 9 out of 10 EQing that I do is taking stuff away. All right, then we have a Roomworks built-in reverb in Cubase. What this is doing is it's doing a bit of reverb, some specific places in the track on the original part. As you can see here, if I open up here, this is the automation that I've done on the original track. So this is controlling some of the elements and plugins we have on the original track. So we have the Roomworks here. This is the bypass on and off. I'm always bypassing. If it's not doing anything, bypass it, and then only use it when it's needed, so it doesn't do any coloring or anything that it shouldn't do. So at this point here, we can just try and play this afterwards. We're bypassing, and then we are actually enabling it, and then the Roomworks is being turned up a little bit here, and then dying down again. So it's giving this part here a little bit of reverb and room. I think this is before the first verse is kicking in. So this is how it sounds. We're just gonna mute everything and just try and play the original part of the track right here. See this part? And this is what it sounds with everything on it. So that's basically what the small reverb is doing. Small details like that is really, in my opinion, necessary to kind of glue everything together and make it sound great. Also, we have a multi-band sidechainer on the original track. What a sidechainer is doing is pretty much just diving in on specified places in the track. So we are removing the kick, the attack of the kick from the original track. So we're making room for the kick that we are going to add to the remix, which is not a remix. So what it's doing here is just it's pumping every time the kick hits in the original track. I can try and we do like this, and we're gonna solo the original track, and you will see the sidechainer working. See the spotlights on the shore, decorated people. And if I bypass it, you can actually hear what it's doing. It's subtle. It's not something that's completely in your face, but you should be able to hear exactly what it's doing actually. Oh, update available. Nice. So let's try it. See the spotlights on the shore, decorated people in the search of something more. And so that's what the sidechainer is doing. It's making room. But the cool thing about this one is it's a multi-band sidechainer, so I can highly recommend this one because you can just use it as a plugin. Just plug it on every like track or a group or bus you want to use it on, and then you can choose how much you want to sidechain the top and low end, and then you do a split frequency here. So everything below 4,100 approximately hertz here is sidechained a lot, and everything above it is sidechained very little. So you can really narrow in on exactly what you wanted to do. That's why it's quite cool. Last thing here is a filter, also from Vengeance. Same here, it's doing obviously some filtering, and automation here shows that we have in the beginning here we are filtering in the original parts of the track that I cut out here. It's like coming in slowly here. And also later on we have a break here where it's filtering down and then like gently coming in again, and that's what the filter is doing. So that's what I've done to the original track. Now we have a lot of elements here as well that I have added. Obviously the drums looking like this. This is folders, by the way. I'm trying to be as neat as possible, so everything is placed in folders so I don't confuse myself. So when I open a folder here, this is all my drum tracks. So we have all the tracks here, and we have a group as well where every track is routed into. So if I want to do compression on all my drums, then I can add a compressor to the group here, and then it affects all my tracks. This is also called bus, I think, in Ableton or Logic language, but we call it group in, or at least I do in Cubase. On my drums bus, I also have some plugins. I have a FabFilter Pro equalizer again, and what it's doing here is some subtle stereo enhancing, as the nice preset up here is kind enough to tell us. So it's doing exactly that. It's just enhancing the stereo bit on the entire drum track a little bit. We also have a compressor doing compression and using this to kind of get more loudness in your face, punchiness out of the drums without actually turning up all of the drums, but actually just compressing them, and then you will be able to get a little more punch out of them. What I've done here is quite a fast attack and relatively fast release as well. This is what I found worked best. I want it to be quite snappy, so that's why I'm using a fast attack. A ratio of 2.68 towards 1. This is a relatively mild compression, and then the threshold here. If you are completely confused about compressors, I recommend that you watch some YouTube tutorials on what a compressor actually does. It's not that difficult to understand, and it's quite easy to hear what a compressor does when you use it, but it can be done great or very wrong as well. But there's no Bible that says this is the correct way of doing compression. Just pretty much do what you find right, and then follow the simple rules. So YouTube is great in that way, with different kind of tutorials from very skilled producers and mastering engineers. So this is what I found correct and found useful for this drum track. Also, I've given it a little bit of reverb from waves, the reverb, just to give it a little bit of room and space, so it's not so boring and sterile. And then we have a filter on it again, because there's probably somewhere that I am filtering. Yeah, see, we're filtering in some of the drums right here, filtering them in there. So it's only, I think it's only in, it's doing a bit here as well. So in the first part we're filtering down a bit. I think that's before the first verse drops, and then we have the break over here where it's going down and then gently coming in again, and that's what the filter's doing. All of these different tracks here is my drum elements. We have 2 different kicks working together. A sample kick that's just doing the high. It sounds like this. And we also have a low kick doing the low end. It sounds like this. And together they sound like this. It's not that often that I actually combine 2 kick samples, but in this case I really loved the low end, but I felt it lacked a little bit of snap. And then I had another kick that I actually loved as well, but I kind of figured this needs a little bit of low end, and actually I just tried to combine them, and with a little EQing, found that they work great together. So if you look at the EQ on On the high kick, I've removed everything at the low end and just created a bit of bell here, so it's pretty much just top end playing. And then we have a VST plugin doing the low end kick, and the plugin is called Kick, actually, Kick 2. The cool thing about this plugin is that you can actually tune your kicks to different tones so it fits the overall key of your track, which actually is a very important thing to do in a lot of tracks, because it can do messed up things with your bass line. If you want your bass and your kick to really work together, they have to kind of match in key. So that's what these two things are doing. Also have a filter on that kick. I can see that's probably because it's being, I believe in the beginning I'm filtering a bit so it's not hitting so hard. Yeah. All right, then we have a drum loop that's been cut into pieces, which I pretty much always do. I love using samples, I love using drum loops and so on, but I always try to make them my own, meaning that I'm cutting and pasting and cutting and pasting and just editing them a lot. So the drum loop is cut, so I only have the I think the attack here of the closed hi-hat, and then the clap snappy thing here sounds like this. And that's what I've done, because I love the clap snap things. It's just worked great, but I didn't want to use all of the drum loop. Not all of the elements were something I needed. A simple closed hi-hat here as well. Nothing fancy. A little bit of a funky cymbal here. Like when you play it together, it kind of makes sense. If you play the drums over here where it's fully enabled. So what we have here is all of the elements working together, and then I have two hi-hat cymbals that I added here to give it kind of that funky groove. And a very important loop I've used as well is something that I actually sampled myself from I can't remember if it's original track or it's a remix by Opolopo. I heard it and I thought, wow, those hi-hats, they were so funky, I want to do something like that. And I basically just sampled them and edited and cut it a bit as well to change them just a little bit. And then they kind of added this great groove that the drums ended up with. By itself, it sounds something like this. So that's the Opolopo loop I used. Everyone steals, just stealing with style. Remember that, stealing with style. Okay, so that's pretty much the drums. One element here that's kind of important as well is that I'm taking I don't know why I placed it in the drums folder, to be honest, but that's probably because I did this re-edit quite fast, so some things are still quite a mess. But this is kind of like a reggae stab guitar that the original track has that I ended up cutting out and using. Sounds like that, and I'm using that and filtering in the original track, so they kind of work together and builds up to this part here where the kind of reggae-ish guitar is also playing in the original track. It's not playing in this part, so I'm playing like this and then adding the guitar. And that's just an example of how you can kind of manipulate elements from the original track and molding it into your own refix, fix, edit, mix, whatever you want to call it. All right.